The court of Napoleon continues to live on in Sweden. Yes, the royal family, the House of Bernadotte, which is French, actually has quite a few tiaras and pieces of jewelry that are actually from the court of Napoleon Bonaparte, meaning that a couple of the tiaras that we saw yesterday during the French state visit are actually over 200 years old. They are pieces of art and actually very, very unique tiaras because neither one of them have a spot of diamonds on them. But yet one of them can definitely still sparkle and the other one is just so unique. There is really no other tiara like it anywhere in Europe. It is so unique, so beautiful, so elegant, and yet also both of these tiaras are highly fragile and only brought out for certain occasions. And definitely the state visit from France was the perfect opportunity. I included in my newsletter my guess that we would see tiaras from the court of Napoleon, and I definitely was not wrong. Because of course, when it comes to royal visits, diplomacy is the name of the game. And if you have a particular tiara or piece of jewelry that actually reflects the country that you are having the state visit with, oftentimes the royals will utilize those pieces of jewelry. And we have a couple of very, very special pieces today from the Swedish collection that the ladies brought out in honor of their guests. So this is French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte. They came for a state visit to Sweden. This was actually scheduled for last year, but they had to move it. And so although it was cold, the tiaras glittered like nothing else. And so let's go ahead and get into it. But real quick, if you have not subscribed to Royal Fashion News, you definitely should do so. If you love tiaras and all things that glitter and you love royal fashion, we will be doing more fashion videos. And of course, and as often as possible, we will have Tiara Tuesday, where we will go into some of these pieces of gorgeous jewelry. And yes, we are a bit behind because it is Wednesday, but they just had this event last night. So let's go ahead and get into the first tiara. And this one is one that I have always loved. And I think, though, it really only works in certain situations. I think it is perfect as a wedding tiara. Other events, it's a little trickier, but we are talking about the Cameo Tiara. This gorgeous piece of artistry, because that is what this is. This is art. And this is a tiara that is very unique. It was made in 1809. So yes, that makes this tiara over 200 years old. In fact, I believe 215 years old. So it is very, very delicate and it's made up of cameos. And apparently the tiara itself was commissioned by Empress Josephine, yes, the wife of Napoleon Bonaparte. So she commissioned this particular tiara. It is made up of red gold and pearls, and of course, the cameos themselves. And this particular tiara came to Sweden through the Duke of Lechtenberg, and we have a lot of pieces that have come from that particular house. So this was the son of Empress Josephine, although he was not the son of Napoleon. But his daughter eventually became Queen Josephina of Sweden and Norway, and that is how that tiara ended up in Sweden. And so this entire set includes a tiara, necklace, a bracelet, a pair of earrings, and there is also a brooch. Now, if you look at actually the box that contains most of the other pieces besides the tiara, you will notice that where the brooch sits actually doesn't match, like the little hole. So apparently they believe that it was originally maybe a comb, but either they don't have it anymore or whatever it was eventually turned into a brooch somewhere down the line. And while the necklace and bracelet and the pair of earrings all contain diamonds, again, the original tiara does not. So it doesn't catch the light like so many other pieces that we show on this channel, but you can see here in this video of Crown Princess Victoria at her wedding that yes, some of aspects of the flatness of the cameos do reflect the light a smidge. But this is definitely a very, very, very different piece than anything that we have. And so looking at the cameos themselves and why perhaps this has become a tiara worn by the royal women of Sweden for their wedding. So this was worn by the king's two sisters, his wife and his daughter. So I think in the future, we will see it on Princess Estelle for her wedding one day. And the reason why is the very central and largest cameo, which features Venus disarming Cupid, which was a very popular motif during the Renaissance. And it was made and signed by Giuseppe Girometti. And so he made this. It perhaps took him over a year to actually create just this little cameo. And then we have another, which is Cupid and Bacchus, who was the god of wine in Greek mythology. And this was made by Vincenzo Catanese. Then we also have another, which is Ceres, the goddess of the harvest. And the bracelets include cameos of Hermes and Athena. And even there is one cameo of Napoleon as well, because within the court of Napoleon and during this time period, there was very much a looking back towards Greek history, and it was considered the neoclassical era. So that these cameos and this motif of looking back to ancient Greek society, which would really be reflected in the jewelry and in the paintings as well. One of the court painters for Napoleon was Jacques-Louis David, who did his coronation of Napoleon painting. He did a couple others of Napoleon. And so you see this very much reflected in the art style itself, which is very classical. This is really before the modern art era, which I personally hate. I prefer neoclassical. It's probably my favorite style. And so this is a little bit past the Renaissance and very lifelike, you could say, and very, again, looking back towards this particular period in time. And so it is a very, as you can imagine, delicate piece, because this is made up of gold, seed pearls. And so it is very, very fragile in a lot of ways, because it just doesn't have the foundation. And you really can't remake, let's say, a frame, because some of the tiaras, like the one we talked about last week, the Vladimir tiara, the entire frame actually had to be remade on that at some point. But this one, you really can't do that. And it does seem to have a bit of flexibility in the base, but I'm sure you also just, again, have to be very, very fragile. And so this tiara eventually found its way into the hands of Princess Silvia, who was the wife of Crown Prince Gustav Adolf, who is the father of the current king. Now, unfortunately, Gustav Adolf actually passed away when he was very young. So actually, Carl Gustav came to the throne quite young. So when he married his wife, Silvia, she actually became queen immediately because he was already king. So this was actually a pretty big deal, because I can't remember the last time, at least in modern times, that the actual ruling monarch actually married somebody while they were king. So this is quite different. I guess you could say the only other example would be Monaco with Prince Albert, but that situation is slightly different because it's a principality versus a kingdom. But this was quite unusual. And so this was the one particularly Silvia decided to wear and had been worn by Brigitte and Desiree. And I will say as well, Princess Silvia, who is Carl Gustav's mother, after her husband died, she allegedly went white overnight and decided no longer to wear this particular tiara because she didn't think it looked good with her white hair. So I just thought that was an interesting note. And we do have a couple of quotes here. Silvia, in regarding to wearing the tiara, said, "The king asked if I wanted to use it at our wedding. That was his idea. It's a beautiful tiara. And it was so nice to know that Princess Brigitte and Princess Desiree also used it. It was a good omen that I could use it now. It became a wedding tiara." And the next time it was worn at a wedding was Crown Princess Victoria. And I think in particular, she rocks it. I think it looked good on Silvia, but when it comes to just the full look, I've always loved and adored Crown Princess Victoria's wedding look. I think it is fabulous. It's fantastic. I think it's just gorgeous. She looks so gorgeous. And I think this particular tiara, it was placed very well. She looked stunning in it. And the tiara really took center stage. Her mother's wedding dress was also very plain, and hers was as well. I particularly like Victoria's better, though. I think it's one of the, like, if you're going to do, you could say, a plain wedding dress, the fit and the style of Victoria's, I think, is absolutely perfect. And so she was offered this particular tiara, and she said, "I've only worn it once at the wedding. It's a very fragile tiara. I have a little extra respect for it. It's very beautiful. I also think about when my mother wore it at her wedding." And Queen Silvia also added, "Nothing was easier than wishing that the crown princess would use it at her wedding. Not just because they got married at the same day as her and her husband, but also she would feel that it was a good omen to wear it. But like all marriages, it's very fragile." And I love that ending. Like all marriages, it's fragile, which is so true. I absolutely love that. And I love this respect for history. I just think it is a stunning piece, one we don't see too often. And honestly, too, sometimes, it's again, a tricky piece because it doesn't have, obviously, diamonds and jewelry and stuff like that. But It was absolutely perfect for the state visit because obviously, if you're visiting with France, what better way to commemorate this visit than with jewelry 200 years old from France itself? So, very interesting. And I will say as well that the House of Bernadotte, which I said actually has French origins, it was because Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, who was one of Napoleon's generals, was actually offered to be king of Sweden, and he took up that offer. And so he ended up in Sweden, although this tiara took a different track to get to Sweden. I just thought that was very, very interesting. And again, so there's this strong, strong connection between the Swedes and the French. Okay, now on to Crown Princess Victoria's tiara, and she rewore this dress. It's an H&M dress, actually. And so she is wearing also something from the Napoleonic court, which is the Napoleonic steel cut tiara. Again, we don't have any other steel cut tiaras in any major family collection as far as I'm aware. I've never seen one, and this one actually has a very funny story behind it. Because believe it or not, this was discovered in a cabinet. They actually did not know they had it, at least for about a century. So apparently, and now there's two versions of the story. One says it was Queen Sylvia. Another one says it was Goron Alm, who was the sort of the court historian, sort of. He ran the Bernadotte Library. And he did pass away a couple of years ago. And apparently, when the new queen came in, she was just curious and wanting to make sure she knew where everything was, and just was sort of doing, you could say, an inventory because it had been a while since something like that was done. And this tiara was rediscovered in a cabinet at the Royal Palace of Stockholm. Now, there's actually another steel cut that I believe somehow was being used as a doorstop, if I remember correctly, which is it's a bandeau. I don't particularly not too fond of it, but this particular one, again, was found somewhere in the back of a cabinet. And it is a beautiful piece, but very unique. And you might not think steel sparkles, but it does. You can see it sparkle a bit in this video as it catches the light. And so it is made of steel and gold. And it has these facets on it, and you can see it, where they are sort of called springs, and they are meant to allow certain parts of the tiara to move. And there's a particular French term, it's called entreblant, and it means to tremble. So it was used in the 18th and 19th century, and they utilized springs in order to make certain parts of the jewelry move. And so you can actually see it a bit in this video. This was from a documentary that the Swedes did about their collection, aspects of their collection. And you can actually see as they're moving it and stuff like that, the aspects of the side of it where the acorns and the leaves are shaking. And that's because they're on springs. And so I have two different variations of how this particular tiara came to Sweden. Obviously, we had the main track with it, which is Josephine of Lechtenberg, who ended up with a tiara, again, from the Duke of Lechtenberg and everything. But we also have a different version from the Royal Watcher, which says it was actually made by Empress Josephine's daughter, who left it to her niece, Princess Eugenie of Hohenzollern-Hechingen. And then it went to Empress Amalie of Brazil, and then ended up with Queen Josephina of Sweden and Norway, who I believe was her sister, if I remember correctly. And that's also how the route that came the Braganza tiara, which is the massive, massive Swedish piece in the collection. And so after discovering this tiara shortly after her wedding, she debuted it in 1979 during the state visit from Austria, and has been worn by many family members, but it's probably most closely associated with Victoria. She reports that this piece, a lot like the Cameo Tiara, is very delicate. And so she usually wears it when she doesn't have to move around too much. And so the design has feathers and acorns, and it was made apparently for Josephine's daughter Hortense de Beauharnais. It has some coordinating earrings and choker necklace. Now, I actually haven't seen the earrings really or choker necklace recently. You can actually see a bit of the choker in the picture with Queen Sylvia, but we really haven't seen that too much. I just can't think of when we've seen it, but I think it is a gorgeous piece. And this tiara in particular I love because one of my favorite pictures of Victoria is this picture from the Nobel Prize ceremony in 2010. So this was right after her wedding to Prince Daniel. They got married in 2010, so I believe this was 2010. And I just think she looks exceptionally regal in this Elie Saab dress and this particular tiara. I think she's just glowing and looking stunning, and I think she definitely looked stunning for the French state visit as well. And once again, this is all about diplomacy, diplomatic dressing, and so she utilized a tiara that had French origins as well. And I forgot about this one, I think, as I was thinking about about tiaras they could wear because I was thinking the Napoleonic amethyst tiara, which is made up of amethyst, again, from the court of Napoleon, but this one is a lovely piece as well. And real quick, we will talk about Princess Sophia. And there's not a lot to say about Sophia because she is wearing her wedding tiara yet again. This seems to be the only tiara she wears. And she changes the toppers. This time we have pearls, which we've seen before, but I do really like her dress. And although I think she's a bit awkward walking in it, but I do think it's a lovely dress. But I would have liked to have seen her in a different tiara. I actually think wearing the amethyst would have been lovely. She's worn it before because I think that would pop really interestingly with the beige of her dress. So that is just my personal opinion though. I think she is lovely. And again, this tiara was purchased for her wedding, and she can change up the top jewelry, but there really isn't much to speak of about it because it doesn't have a long history. So guys, anyways, let me know what you think your favorite look of the evening is. And just to let you know, the different sashes everyone is wearing. So the king and the queen, so Carl Gustaf and Queen Sylvia, are wearing the Legion of Honor for France. Emmanuel Macron is wearing the Order of the Seraphim, which is the highest order in Sweden. And then Crown Princess Victoria was offered the French Order of National Merit. And everyone else, Prince Daniel, Prince Carl Philip, and Princess Sophia, are just wearing their Order of the Seraphim. So, and we also have, real quick, I will mention Princess Christina attended as well. So she is one of the king's sisters. She's wearing their aquamarine Kokoshnik tiara, which is one of my favorite tiaras, although I will have to say it particularly sparkles on Princess Madeline. And Princess Madeline is supposed to be relocating back to Sweden this year with her family. They currently live in Florida, and I can't wait to hopefully see her join more of these events coming up soon. So guys, again, let me know what you think of this video. Let me know what you think of all these lovely tiaras. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
We don't count the carats, we count the centuries.